Hey everybody, I'm Todd Allmendinger from the Cleantech Group here at the Cleantech Forum North America in San Diego. I lead our consulting and research activities, and I'm fortunate today to be here with Emilie Mazzacurati, the co-founder of Tailwind. And we're going to talk about resilience. Why resilience? Because we're kind of in a tough place these days. A lot of talk about mitigation, emissions, avoiding that, but everybody talked about 2023 was one of the hottest years recorded. Here at the forum yesterday, we almost got flooded because there was so much rain. At our forum last year, we had a sandstorm. Weather events, can't predict them as often as you want, and the impact goes beyond that. So with it being such a big deal, lots of funds investing in decarbonization, lots of funds in emissions. Why isn't there more focus on resilience and adaptation?
That's a great question, Todd, and thanks for having me. So there's a couple of different things that are working together against adaptation, but maybe let's first take a step back, give a little more context beyond yesterday's floods in San Diego. As you mentioned, 2023, hottest year on record and probably coolest year of the century ahead of us, right? Yeah. So this is what we're confronting. It's a huge need. The UN estimates that we're going to need $300 billion of investment annually to deal with the physical impacts of climate change. It's also a big opportunity. The World Economic Forum estimates $2 trillion market by 2026. So why isn't there more activity and more investment? And that need hasn't yet matured into a demand signal or an investment opportunity. And that with Tailwind, that's what we're trying to help move along. And we see three main gaps in the market. First one is a capital gap. If you look at the billions of dollars going in climate tech, only 1% of VC funding goes to adaptation and resilience. So that's a tiny sliver. And anecdotally looking around, I can give you maybe half a dozen specialized funds who have an articulated, thought-through thesis about adaptation and resilience. And then a number of others who are resilience curious, but it's really not a big crowd. So there's a capital gap. Second gap is the demand gap. As I mentioned, a lot of needs. We expect governments, corporations to need to get equipped and get better technologies, products, and services to deal with the impact of climate change. A lot of those organizations are still understanding their risks and exposure, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do, where they're willing to put money to deal with the risks. They haven't necessarily said, I need a type of product or material that has this performance requirement that will help me deal with this pain point or use case. So that's also a place where we're trying to help move things along. And then the third gap is the lack of an ecosystem. Like, awesome that I'm here today in the midst of Cleantech. I feel a little lonely here. There's not a lot of people who are talking about adaptation and resilience tech, but I very much think that's going to change. And so just making sure that startups and innovators who want to address those needs have a place where they can get the support from investors, from the media ecosystem, from accelerators, incubators who can help them map their path to market and understand where to get funding and develop the right business models.
And you and your co-founder, Katie McDonald, aren't coming into this out of nowhere. This is something you guys have quite a bit of experience in.
Out of a hat.
Out of the hat. So you had a company, 427, with a lot of climate modeling and looking at what's going on. That data was then acquired, and that whole company was acquired by Moody's, who started incorporating some of that into their risk and debt. So this is not new territory for you. You've been looking at the modeling. You've been looking at this. Now that 427 is in Moody's, you're sitting back going, okay, how else can I help save the planet? Because it's a bit of a mess.
Exactly. So 12 years ago, founded a company, 427, with a goal to help drive investment in adaptation by providing better data and market intelligence. And so we set out to take best available scientific models from the IPCC and did the work, both the methodology work to translate the science into metrics that made sense to investors, and also the technical work of extracting and processing the data, and so help move things along in terms of, along with others in the market. But in terms of financial institutions and lending institutions understanding that they had exposure, they had risk in their portfolio. The real estate in particular was an early adopter and remains, I think, well ahead of the curve in terms of thinking about impact. But to your point, I sold the company, helped mainstream it into Moody's products, took a step back, and just like, okay, well, clearly that was a necessary but not sufficient condition, right? Because it's still not. So what else is needed? So this is why the focus into the next phase of, even after you understand your risk, there's still an extra step that's needed to articulate what it is that you need to address this risk.
And so how is Tailwind going about that? What are you guys going to do?
So we're an innovation studio focused on accelerating the development and deployment of adaptation and resilience solutions. So adaptation and resilience solutions we define as the products and services that can help predict, prevent, mitigate, and enable the recovery from climate events, physical impacts of climate change, floods, wildfires, extreme heat, etc. And so we're a bit of a hybrid organization, very mission-driven. One part of what we do is field building, ecosystem development. And so it's putting out publication, research events around adaptation and resilience. What does that mean? What are the sectors? What are the technologies? What's the pipeline for investments? Technical briefs on specific sectors. So that's going to be starting to come out this year. We're doing partnerships with accelerators to help create dedicated innovation challenges or cohorts around adaptation and resilience, and doing a lot of evangelizing. And then we're doing some very targeted consulting with some really market movers who are thinking about adaptation and resilience and helping them really develop their own investment thesis or funding strategy. And then the other part of the organization is starting to invest, and so write checks, early stage companies in adaptation and resilience, with an eye to launching a fund and raising a fund next year focused on adaptation and resilience.
So what kind of companies do you think we need right now? There's a range of different areas we could talk about. I think we've talked about agriculture and food, we've talked about ports, we've talked about all types of things. So sitting back and looking at that, how do you break up those different areas and what kind of companies do we need?
Yes, very broad. So basic human needs, right? You need food and water, you need shelter, you need functioning infrastructure, you need health and medication and functioning hospitals in the middle of a storm. You need ecosystems. There's fewer opportunities there, but there's going to be some as well. So it's really broad, and there's going to be needs for opportunities to help mitigate the risk. And so anybody who operates on the surface of the planet is actually exposed, right, to something probably. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then in terms of investing into new products and opportunities, there's the budding sector of sensing and modeling and analytics and predictive analytics, which is all well and good, but again, insufficient, right? And then there's going to be a lot of hard tech and manufacturing. So it could be consumer products and wearables for extreme heat to keep you cool, or it could be med tech. It's the defibrillator of heat strokes. There are companies out there doing that. It could be water air capture. The same way you'd want to have your solar panel and your own little microgrid, you could have your own water generation system on site, or there are water air capture company that do more of a utility model and provide water and create like a water farm, right? So it's really a very broad range. You mentioned agriculture, of course, built environment. There's going to be a ton of opportunities there.
So you don't have a big team yet.
Correct.
Where do you start? How do you pick a starting point?
We're actually slow walking by design because for two reasons. One is because the market is maturing and evolving quite quickly, and we want to be focused on where we can be most catalytic. And so if we see that with a little bit of support and sharing and education, we can get the VCs to bring adaptation and resilience into their investment thesis. Then we're going to maybe focus on some parts of the markets that are going to be less busy, because we want our check to make a difference. And also because right now a lot of conceptual and analytical thinking is needed with Katie, who you mentioned, my co-founder, she comes from the climate tech world. I come from adaptation and resilience. And so we're putting our hats together on how do we bring those different worlds together? How do we translate UN, World Bank speak on adaptation into something that's investable for a VC? And so that is the work that we're doing right now, and we think it's going to be really important to then catalyze a lot of activity beyond what we do ourselves.
So what about beyond VCs? What about the corporates? What about governments, NGOs? This isn't a problem that's going to be solved just by VCs.
Certainly not. You're going to need government and corporates to do this work of understanding their risk and of planning how they're going to respond to them, and then of getting the word out that they need certain products or services to meet those needs. And some of that work is happening. It's uneven, I will say, very uneven in the corporate sector. You have some really advanced companies that are doing really sophisticated work, and then a lot of other companies who are like, this is really material, we have other problems right now. And then on the government side, you have a lot of money that's been earmarked through specific programs from the Biden administration. There's also some in the IRA, the IIJA. How and when does it trickle down? How much flexibilities do local government have to incorporate innovative products or solutions into those projects that they may roll out? There's going to be a lot of questions to sort out there.
So what do you think, coming out of the COP, there's been a lot of emphasis on the South and a lot of reparation funds. How do you think any of that could be used to help with resilience, with adaptation? Because some of those countries are at risk, don't have capital for a lot of these things.
Yeah, there's different discussion thread. There is one worry, which is there's a conversation about loss and damage, which is the things that we cannot save. And what we've seen is a lot of commitments for loss and damage coming from adaptation funding envelopes. And so it's actually, funding, it's like right hand, left hand. It's not more money going to how do we deal with the impact. So that to me is a concern.
It's kind of cleaning up the mess.
No, it's
paying off the mess.
It's saying, well, we're not even going to try to save it. We're just going to accept that it's gone. And so, wait, you skipped the part where we were trying to save a few things. The positive things, I think, are efforts to tie debt relief with adaptation, resilience, and other climate and biodiversity measures, where countries may get debt forgiveness or better terms in exchange or as a reward for putting in place certain types of programs or initiatives that protect their biodiversity or that are good for adaptation. And so that's doing two goods in a way, right? You're helping fund some good projects. You're also getting rid of some of those legacy international debt issues, which separate conversation, but quite gross when you think about it. So,
well, you got a lot on your plate ahead of you coming here. Building out a team, raising the fund, engaging in the ecosystem, putting out some intelligence, building consensus. A lot to do, and something very much needed.
For sure, but we also have a lot of energy, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of partners. And so if you're a startup out there and you're doing technology in the field, if you're an investor and you want to learn more, just do reach out, right? Because we're there and we want to help.
There we go. Well, thank you very much for coming here to San Diego.
My pleasure.
Having the conversation. And for everybody else out there, look forward to Tailwind and what you and your partner do to build and save the world. Make us more resilient.
Team effort.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd.